My name is Stephanie Snow and I'm a wedding photographer in Southwest Florida. I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk to you about why it's important to work with your photographer when you're establishing your timeline for your wedding day. I want to break this down into 3 parts and I'm hoping to do it in 10 minutes or less. So here we go. So why it's important to consult with your photographer when you're planning the timeline for your day is because frankly, we know a lot of things about how much time things take behind the scenes. And I want to break that down into 3 parts for you. So there's the getting ready portion. Most brides and couples have, well, especially brides, have their hair and makeup done or want to have that done on the day of the wedding. That's very special. Sometimes you have the opportunity to go to the salon to have it done, but it's pretty common, at least here in Florida for a destination wedding, that you have the hair and makeup team come to you. And that way they can get not only the bride, but also your bridesmaids, oftentimes the mothers of the bride and mother of the groom. So it's a really special, fun time to bond. And it can be really great time to have pictures taken. So first you need to decide if you want to have pictures taken of that time. We try not to be there when you're first getting going in the morning. We let you have your first cups of coffee and let the makeup team get started. But by the time they get there for the finishing touches on the makeup and the hair, those are some really fun shots to get together. You get your bride tribe and gets a lot of movement and everyone's happy and relaxed, and if there happens to be any champagne, then we just capture what is there. So that's kind of fun. As far as consulting your photographer though, is one thing that I've learned is a lot of the couples don't leave enough time for the hair and makeup. So let's say you want to be done with hair and makeup by 3. I hate to mention, but a lot of times that often runs a little bit later. So it's just important to work with your photographer and find out how much of that time you want captured. And also as part of that, if there's going to be your first look. A lot of couples have gone the last few years to actually seeing each other before the wedding. There's a few reasons for that, but as far as taking the stress off and having that excitement alone together before you have to do it in front of everybody in the big crowd, so that can be nice. And if you do want to have that first look, it's absolutely important that we arrange to have the hair and makeup done even before that, so there's time built into the timeline between hair and makeup and the ceremony to get that. And that can be up to an hour that we want to leave time for. So just working with your photographer and expressing to them what is important to you can help set the whole tone for the day. Next, moving on to the ceremony. I am here in Southwest Florida, as I mentioned, and we have a lot of short beach ceremonies. What I think a lot of couples don't realize is that a short beach ceremony can still last a half an hour. In fact, I like to plan for a half an hour. And the reason for that is, it's just all the moving parts of it. You need to have time for the groom and the groomsmen to be there, whether they walk down the aisle, walking the parents down the aisle, or walking the bridesmaids down the aisle. We need to make time for that. Sometimes the groomsmen come first if it's a small wedding and they're just standing up front, but they're typically there 5 minutes or so before the start time of the wedding. Then there's the time for the bride to arrive. As I mentioned, you need to decide if your parents are going to walk down the aisle as part of the processional or if they're just going to be seated already, so that can take time. You need obviously time for the bride to walk down, time for the vows, and again, even if it's a short ceremony and you're saying your own vows, that can last 10 to 15 minutes. That's usually, short ceremonies are still 10 to 15 minutes. I think the shortest one I've had is about 8, so we still need to allow time for that. And then there's obviously the time after where they say you're now man and wife, you may kiss the bride, and then walking back down the aisle, and time for your entire wedding party to walk back down the aisle. And what a lot of people don't even think about is what I call hugs and kisses. I like to leave 5 to 10 minutes for hugs and kisses after you've come back down the aisle, because that is the time that your families are going to surround you and fill you with love, and you're going to celebrate with them and have some of the biggest smiles, and crying can happen or not. But you need to leave time in that. So even a quick beach ceremony, by the time all that happens, it's safest to plan for about a half an hour. I also like to talk to couples about how many family photos that they want after the ceremony. The thing to remember is each grouping that you have can take 2 to 3 minutes to organize and take the shots of. So you go, well, I just want it with my parents and my grandparents and my side of the family. That's great. And then his side, obviously, and then we want them together, and then we want the shots of our bridal party, and then maybe there's some kids in the group that I want pictures of, and then my best friend from college or my co-workers are here. So we start with the tight-knit family, and then we start to go out from there, but just keeping in mind that every group takes 2 to 3 minutes to get everybody called over, to get lined up, positioned, organized, make sure the light's on everybody, and it takes several shots where hopefully no one is blinking. And so just keep in mind that every one of those shots takes 2 to 3 minutes to put together. So by the time you come up with 10 groupings, which is really only 5 on your side and 5 on his side, you're half an hour into family photos, okay? And then most importantly, you don't want to forget time for your guys' portraits together. That's when we like to get rid of everybody else. If you haven't done the first look, then that's the time that you and your significant other are going to be together, and we're going to get pictures of each one of you guys alone as well as together in as many different loving scenarios as we can have time allotted for. Okay, so in general, for our timeline, from the couples that I work with, I highly recommend an hour and a half for the ceremony portion, timed backwards from wherever you want to be next. So if we're doing a sunset on the beach, okay, an hour and a half back from whatever's the sunset time is a great time to start considering having your ceremony. I'm working with a couple right now. They want to make sure they hit a 5 o'clock cocktail hour. They want to go to their own cocktail hour, okay? So my recommendation has been bumping an hour and a half back. If you want to go to your entire cocktail hour, if you don't mind going to part of your cocktail hour, then those are just some things that we talk about and we work into. But have a realistic expectation going in as far as how long that's going to take. So as far as reception goes, why it's important to talk to your photographer about your reception is that although there's a natural flow to how things go during the reception, you start with your grand entrance, then a lot of times couples go directly into their first dance, or sometimes they just have a seat, and then there's the prayer, and then there's dinner that's served. It's just helpful that your photographer have an idea of the order that things are going to happen in, for the purpose that most times receptions happen after dark, and a photographer like myself, we use lights, speed lights, strobes, constant lights, whatever it is that we're using, and it's just a matter for us to make sure that we are in the right position and have the lighting in the right position, so that we need to know if you're going to do your first dance before the cake cutting, so that we can have our lights position for the cake cutting so that we don't miss that, or you don't tell us, hey, we're going to cut the cake now, and then it takes us 2 or 3 minutes, because we like to be ahead of the curve. So it just really helps us to go with the flow, and we totally understand that, especially when we get into the reception, things kind of happen as a natural flow. Obviously, when you're done with dinner, you're done with dinner, and you're going to greet your tables. But just so that we have an idea, okay, the first dance is next, and then we're going to go to cake cutting, or the cake cutting's first, or we're going to have the father-daughter dances. So just so that we have an idea. It doesn't have to be quite as nailed down at that point, but if we're doing bouquet tosses and garter tosses, then that's good for us to know, again, just so that we can be in the right position. So those are the reasons why it's helpful to work with your photographer when you are getting ready to develop your timeline, and it is definitely worth a quick conversation with your photographer to see how they can, what tips and suggestions that they can offer you. It's much harder for us on the back end that we're just handed a timeline and this is how everything goes, when we know in our mind there are certain things that take a certain amount of time. We will always work with whatever time we're given, because that's why we're professionals and that's what we do, and we're going to make the best, most beautiful day, but we can make sure that we give you what you want in the photos that you want by working with us and planning that ahead of time. Again, thank you for joining me. I hope I've made this under 10 minutes. My name is Stephanie Snow. I am Stephanie Snow Photography in Southwest Florida, and you can check out my website at stephaniesnowphotography.com. You can email me at stephaniesnowphoto@yahoo.com.